Welcome back to Empathetic Presence. I have been thinking so much about the power of words, and I just had to have a conversation with my colleague and client, Christina Ferguson, founder of Parable. Christina talks about how words are the primary vehicle in which we are human. Christina is a storyteller and meaning maker, and as founder and chief storyteller at Parable, she empowers leaders to put fresh, compelling words to who they are, where they're headed, and how they'll get there. Christina's company supports many mission-driven organizations, and I loved hearing about her process of helping founders and teams excavate their mission and their message. She sees storytelling as an act of self-knowing. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Christina Ferguson. Welcome, Christina, to the Empathetic Presence podcast.
Hi, Lee. Thank you so much.
I am so thrilled to talk to you, Christina, because you understand the power of words. And we are in a moment right now where words are really so important. And you and I have known each other for some time, and you are the founder of Parable. Can you tell us a little bit about Parable?
Yes, we work with organizations and leaders who are looking to tap into their identity and really live it out loud and tell the story about who they are and what they do. I have yet to come up with a really good term for that because I kind of bristle at the idea or the term of branding or marketing because it seems to me to lack a little bit of that inner process that needs to happen in order to really step into one's identity as an organization or a leader, like I mentioned. But that's what we do, and it's so fun. And there's so many ways that then it comes into life through different marketing channels, through different communications channels for an organization.
Love that you talk about identity, and I really want to kind of dig into that word with you because it can mean so many different things, and I know it's so important, but I think a lot of us struggle to find our voice with writing, with speaking. So what do you mean by identity?
I mean, who a leader truly is or who an organization truly is. And when I think about the two worlds of professional and personal, there's usually some center of the Venn diagram where this identity lives, where it's not entirely, personal, my favorite color, or, what I like to do on the weekend. And it's not solely professional. It's that beautiful blend of just the self. And I think that carries over to an organization as well of what was an organization's very purpose from the start of its founding? How has it evolved? But what core tenets and threads just carry through no matter what strategic priorities change, no matter how the moment is changing? There are certain pillars that will always remain the same. And what I find is that organizations and leaders, we can have a hard time remembering what those are when we're caught up in the day-to-day of doing the thing, of running the business, running the nonprofit, advocating out in the community. And so the way I like to describe the process of finding and reclaiming one's identity in this way is like holding up a mirror to point to clients, whether they are organizations or individuals, to say, this is what you're doing. These are the words you're using. Here's what vibe, you're giving off. And a lot of times we don't realize that for ourselves because we're just doing it all the time. We don't tend to stop and think that how we might be doing something is different or unique from anybody else. And it's only with an outside perspective that we can realize, oh, this is my identity because, not everyone is actually doing it this way.
Wow, it can be such a differentiator, right?
Yes.
And first of all, I just want to go back to something that you said, an uplift that you said you don't love the word branding. And I'm also struggling with that word because so many actually organizations have been asking recently for me to do like personal branding workshops.
Yeah.
And this is a term that I think gets really corporate and we can't find our own identity in it. And so hearing you say that identity is about reclaiming who you truly are whether it's an individual or an organization, feels really refreshing because it is about truth and honesty,
Yeah,
and there's a simplicity to that.
I agree. Now, I might be fact checked and proven wrong here, but when I think of the word branding, where I think it comes from is to brand a cattle or some, right, some livestock, right? That's the process of imprinting something external that wasn't there before. And that's why it doesn't sit well with me, because what I think of true authentic branding is letting what's in come out.
How
Does that make sense?
letting what's in come, of course it makes sense, Christina. And even this discrepancy that you're talking about between how we think we're perceived versus how we feel internally, that's something that I see with my clients all the time. I work with people who are sure that people can see how nervous they are or think they're being perceived in a certain way. And we have to eliminate that discrepancy in order for them to truly connect to their identity.
Yes, agreed. It's thinking about where is the information or the spirit or whatever inspiration, where is it, what direction is it flowing in? Is it coming from outside in or inside out? And I think you and I would both agree, like the magic happens when it's coming from inside out.
Yes, and when we stop looking for that external validation.
Yeah.
And so what you're talking about makes it sound like your process with your clients is really about a unraveling
Hmm.
and right, a revealing of what's already there.
Totally. Yes. It's about getting to the core of again what an organization or individual is doing, and why. And those things don't
Yeah.
really change, and they've changed very little from a founding or from a historical context. And I find the process to arrive at that is figuring out ways for the organization again or the leader to really just be themselves. Like speak off the cuff. Tell me what you actually think. Tell me just in your own words. Like no one's recording this. Just tell me what you do. Tell me why you love it. Uh, if you could do nothing else but this one thing, what would it be? Really, we kind of it feels almost like a therapy session sometimes to start off because it's getting to the heart of the individual.
And every organization is made up of individuals. And, even for me, I've been doing this work for 10 years. And it's only this year that I feel like I finally am finding the language, the words to articulate what I do.
Yes.
And I want to know, like, what is it about words? Because some of us feel more natural in the written word. Others of us feel more natural in the spoken word. What is it about writing and words?
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a great question. I can think of maybe four kinds of human connection. I could think of human touch, which is reserved for a very small circle of people in our lives. I can think of art, so music, painting, photography, dance, uh, usually absent of words. Uh, and I can think of shared action or experience, so a ritual, a meal, an act of service that even in silence might bring people together and form some connection. And then I can think of words. And of those four, I really think words are the most prominent and convenient. And it's the media we use, whether written or spoken or sung or chanted. Uh, it's 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 the primary vehicle in which we're human.
It's the primary vehicle in which we're human.
I think, but maybe I'm biased because I write.
I agree with you though, and I do believe that that's what sets us apart from other mammals is our ability to communicate in the way that we do and interpret and analyze and judge and critique, and hearing you even say that words are the primary vehicle of expression of humanity.
Yeah.
it makes sense to me then why there's so much darn anxiety
Oh,
around
yes.
words and our voices, whether written or spoken, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I think part of that anxiety, if I had to guess, uh, part of it is for sure that feeling of self-consciousness that anyone or most people might feel in sharing a part of themselves, because there's a vulnerability that's required there. The other part that I do think plays into this is I think as a culture, we have lost to some extent the ability to self-reflect. And I think self-reflection is so necessary to be able to use words, whether in speech or in writing. I was reading a book recently that is really blowing my mind. I'm still reading it. It's called Super Bloom by Nicholas Carr, and I highly recommend it for if anyone hasn't read it. And in the book, he talks about just the evolution of how we've communicated over the past 2 centuries. And he talks a lot about letter writing and how that was an act of communication. There was a very practical function to it of sharing information between two individuals when there was no other technology to do so. However, he also says it was a very strong exercise in self-reflection, because to be able to write a really thoughtful letter, one had to sit down, gather one's thoughts, think about how they want to frame it. Paper was not something you could go to Office Depot and buy. There was a limited resource of a sense. Inks, kind of similar, right? And so you had to be really thoughtful and turn inward and think and wrestle through ideas and come up with how you want to structure them. And who has time? Like we don't have time to do that very much. And so I think we've lost the ability to flex that muscle. And I think it's when we can give ourselves maybe a little bit of silence, a little bit of space, a little bit of encouragement, and really hone a practice of self-reflection. I do think we become better communicators, whether through writing or speech or some other vehicle.
That is so fascinating just about the change of the materials over time and how they were less available and how much that would change our ability to self-process. Like, is there an equivalent in the digital age? Are we self-reflecting when we prepare an email, or are we much more impulsive? Are we not connecting in the same way?
Well, the book would argue we are more impulsive. And I I I do think people put thought depending on the communication. There's no blanket statement that would be appropriate here. However, I think overall we trend in the direction of I'm just going to put out like a stream of conscious whatever is on the top of my mind without asking myself the hard questions about why I think that way, or where is this coming from, or what emotional state is bringing this about, or how can I connect this to something else that happened previously, or let me understand the reader. What tone, voice, words do they need to hear for this to really resonate with them? We don't really, most of us, I don't think, really ask those questions or really dig deeper beyond what's on the top of our mind.
What's fascinating about what you're saying, Christina, is that this stream of consciousness is something that I see in spoken communication. So many of the people who come to see me find that they're thinking and speaking at the same time. They're speaking unconsciously. They're not feeling able to really like put their own voice into their unconscious communication. And it really feels powerful to think of that as like a lack of confidence, like a lack of authority in asking myself, what do I want to say? Because I fear that a lot of us don't trust our voices or don't think we're good writers or good speakers. And how do we develop that muscle if we feel unpracticed in it?
Mm. One way to do it is to develop a journaling habit or practice. I found that to be really critical in my own communication, I think, to write every day, that in a way that's not shared ever, uh, but that just allows me a playground in my mind to see what is there and to make connections and to know myself. And therefore, when I'm in a situation where I need to communicate, I have a little bit more to work with.
I really think that that's what's lacking right now is this self-knowing.
Yes. Yes. I think it was Socrates who said to know thyself is the beginning of wisdom. And wisdom is kind of lacking. We don't have a lot there.
Yeah. And I have a lot of clients who teach on leadership and who talk about, self-awareness as the foundation of leadership.
Okay.
And of course, we can talk about the importance of communication in that too. And there's something really powerful, I also think, with social media, where so much of our written communication, but even spoken communication, video is like for someone else, or if it's for presentational moments on social media, it's not this self reflective. It's not writing a letter to one other person. It's like a broadcast.
Yeah,
That I think has changed how we communicate too.
100%. You sound like you have read this book I'm talking about.
I need to read this book. It sounds good.
Yes, because in it he talks about social media as being the first time that we ever had mass to mass communication. There was always one to mass or one to one. And now we're in this era of mass to mass. And initially the thinking was, well, when that happens, my goodness, we would never have a disagreement because we're all able to talk and share our opinions and perspectives and find common ground. And it's like this massive democratization of word. And that's actually not how it's played out, obviously. It's just become noise. And the volume that is now possible because of various technologies has further limited our ability to self-reflect, to compose a coherent, thoughtful message. And we are overwhelmed by also digesting at the same time by like taking in, we're drinking from a fire hose, and then also trying to spit back out something coherent. And it's kind of a losing battle.
Wow. Especially because I think we are not all agreeing on what the truth is, we going back to that word truth.
Yeah.
And this moment feels like a real pressure cooker for what we're talking about here, Christina. And you help at Parable, you help organizations speak their story. And what are you seeing in terms of this moment where I imagine it might be challenging for certain organizations to be true to their identity, given the constraints that we're seeing on the federal level, the authoritarianism, the silencing, the censoring. So, how can organizations be true in this moment?
That's a really good question. It starts with that inner reflection of what are the uncompromisable aspects of who we are, or as a leader, who one is. And then there's a continuum. There's going to be, one side, there's the uncompromisable aspects of an individual organizational's identity. And then there'll be more layers beyond that of, other ways of communicating that in an ideal world, an organization could employ. And right now, I think some of those extra layers are kind of we're thinking a little bit harder about, okay, do I want to go out there? Do I want to go to that extent? And yet what I'm seeing with clients is at that very core of the uncompromisable aspects to one's identity are unchanged. And clients are leaning into them with more conviction. And we're just having to get creative with how. And what I'm seeing as well is a bit of a splitting, for better or for worse, between language that an organization might use internally versus externally. And so I think now more than ever, there's an opportunity to really have thoughtful strategies for both of those arenas.
Yeah.
Internal communication and the external one. And I can give you an example of what I mean by this. I work with a lot of nonprofit clients, and some of them receive federal funding. And even on a good day, an organization needs to use certain words to be able to qualify for federal funding. I can give a more concrete example. One client I have is a school for children with learning differences. And this school, rightfully so, sort of shudders at the idea of using the word disability. However, to receive federal funding, they need to use the language that has been specified by the government.
Yeah.
Right. And so we then had to become really disciplined in what's the messaging that we use in those situations versus what are we talking just colloquially with our external community, and then how are we talking about it internally. And obviously there's going to be similarities, but having that discipline is becoming very important, more so now than ever.
Yeah, absolutely. And really having to think about audience in maybe an even more specific way. And you talked about this social media being the first time that it's like many to many, and that's really fascinating.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in how do we speak one to many, whether that's an organization or an individual, with this idea that we have to speak to people. I've always talked about public speaking as like we can't speak to a group of 50 people. We're actually only speaking to one person at a time. So how do you think about making a message resonate when it is to so many diverse, different types of people?
I think about a few questions. I might pose the question of what is so true that can't go unsaid, and more so, what is so true that it must be said by you or like the individual or the organization. And then I really encourage clients of all kinds to view the process of getting to the message as being the point in itself. The wrestling that has to happen, that inner reflection, the friction that has to happen, because it's not easy to find a short few words that can describe what an organization or an individual does that everyone's on board with. There's friction in that process. And what I try to encourage my clients to see is that that's often the point. And I think that's where we can also talk about AI, to be honest, because AI, we're might be getting to a very similar outcome, but the process has been totally removed, right? The wrestling, the friction, the knowing, the self-reflection, that's all completely moot. And I think we're remiss if we don't acknowledge that.
I'm having a moment here. I'm really just seeing so much of our creative process. And we know that there is this tension, there is this friction and this self-knowing. and AI taking that out, is it a less interesting result? Certainly, I think the answer is yes.
Yeah.
But I also can think of this in terms of when I was in art school and the people who didn't have to work day jobs and were fully supported by family, even after art school. I have to say, I don't think that the art was as good.
Oh, interesting. Because there was no friction in how they created it.
Aha.
Um,
I'm a big believer that like our limitations
yes.
breed creativity. As a theater person, I always was like, give me less of a budget because we're going to have more resourcefulness and scrappiness.
Totally. 100%. Yes. Yeah.
What you're talking about of like that having to kind of edit and choose, it's a painful process of excavation almost, is what it sounds like.
Yes. And I think in this day and age, we people can tend to think of communication as, more is better. Just like put it out there,
Right.
put something out there. And the more I do this work, the more I think there's a mastery that's required, a really serious discipline, a message discipline, with what we say and how and when. And yeah, that's human stuff. Like that's not ever going to be a computer business.
Wow. So can we talk a little bit about AI? Because I think what you were talking about before with that like vulnerable self-reflection, AI kind of cancels that out. And how can we continue to strengthen our own voices with these tools that are like really becoming so disruptive even in our everyday? They feel almost like you have to use them.
Yeah.
How can we keep strengthening our voices?
I think just because one can use them doesn't mean that one should. Honestly, I think there's so many parallels I can think about. I can think about fast food. It's like just because we could go to the drive-through and get some French fries and a Big Mac, it doesn't mean that we probably should do that every day. Our taste buds will change, our bodies will change. Eating slow, thoughtfully cooked food is part of being human, just the same way as looking inwards, composing a message, and communicating it is human.
Yeah. And we have to move away from all of this efficiency and productivity and, just getting to the end result while really negating the process, like you said.
Yes, I think there's going to be many organizations that say, we don't care about the process. We want just like a really cool outcome. And AI is great. And you'll probably get that really great outcome and you don't need a marketing team anymore.
Hmm.
There's also going to be organizations and leaders who say, well, I want the process. I don't want to phone it in. I don't want the fast food. I think
Hmm.
ease and efficiency have a true cost on humanity. I mentioned the fast food, but also texting, the prevalence of Zooms, of cheap,
Yeah.
fast shipping of goods. The list goes on and on. That efficiency actually brings about a cost that often we don't realize until a little bit further in.
Yeah, I actually left social media, most social media, except for LinkedIn earlier this year. And I found that it's a really interesting impact that I'm going deeper with fewer people and less wide, but it feels more meaningful.
I
It
love.
feels like what I need right now.
Yeah, what you're describing sounds nourishing. And I don't even think we stop to think is like what I'm consuming nourishing or not, because we're just bombarded. I read something that said the amount of data that existed in the world from the birth of humanity until something like 2003 is now created every year or
Oh
something
my goodness.
ridiculous like that. I'm probably butchering the exact stat, but something as drastic as that. And for a while, we were under the guise that we could keep up and that we had to
Oh,
keep up. And I think in my own personal life, it's becoming so blatantly obvious I can't keep up. This is actually
no.
miserable.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to consume a whole lot less of it. And I want to consume something that's like really healthy and good and feels.
Yeah. I think we're going to see a bit of a slowing down and us returning to more analog. We can see like cassette tapes coming back and all these fun things. But I think we also need to really honor the time it takes to do this reflection work.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you could like take us into parable a little bit. Like, what are some of the things that organizations come to parable for? And then what do they walk away with? And what should we know about that process?
Yes, that's a great question. A lot of organizations come to Parable because they say they need a new mission statement. And often what they're looking for is a redo of a 3 to 5 sentence mishmash that they currently
Yeah.
have. And what they walk away with is something like 6 or 10 words.
Huh.
Really gets to what they do. Or they might need a clear direction of where they're headed and almost bordering on strategic planning.
Hmm.
And what I often talk about is, well, that's really hard to do without having a sense of who one is. Like how can we chart the course forward if we're not really sure like what we're bringing along with us? And so
Yeah.
even strategic planning, the starting point in my work, in my opinion, it starts with this kind of inner reflection and identity work.
Wow. So it's really starting with identity, and then we can get to mission, who we are, and then we can get to vision,
Yeah.
what we're building.
Yeah,
But if we don't start with that solid foundation, then we don't know who we are.
totally. And it's the same. I go back to that metaphor of as something stamped on or branded on versus like lived out,
Yeah.
coming from within.
Yeah.
And yeah, there are plenty of strategic plans, let's say, that are really solid, highly best practiced. And yet, might they be a fit for every organization if they're just stamped on? Probably not.
Mm. I see this with my clients too. Some people come to me and they want really quick tools and techniques. They don't want to go deep. They don't want to personalize it. And it doesn't have the same impact because it's not theirs.
Yes. I find that and you're so right. The impact is not going to be there. And I think what we as professionals then can do to kind of prod clients in this slower direction is instead to just pose questions. You know, I find more and more, I didn't always start out doing this, but more and more now, if I get a request for those kind of quick tools, quick fixes, I'll share a list of questions for them to think about instead of giving a list of tools.
Nice.
And that is not really it's not what, at first they're like, I don't really want that. Just want you to tell me what to do. And again, the process is the point.
The process is
I'm
the
not going to be
point.
able to tell you what to do.
The process is the point. I love that so much. I'm learning so much about your process and how you work with clients. And I wonder, Christina, what about for those of us who we might be individuals, we might be a part of organizations, but we want to do that deeper work to know ourselves. We want to be able to articulate who we are, our identity. What can we do to practice that and to start listening to ourselves?
I think in giving ourselves the space to pay attention, like uh, I find a lot of my days happen without me realizing it. And
Yep.
I hate that. So
Me too.
when I pay attention to a longing, a tugging, a nagging that is coming from within, when I pay attention to a piece of art or a color that really captures my eye, when I pay attention to the sound of a laugh that just feels contagious and infectious, it's like that is how I come to know myself. And unfortunately, we live in a world where that's really hard to do. It's hard to do by accident.
Yeah. It almost feels like you have to go against the grain of our productive capitalist machine.
Yeah.
But I think it's so important right now.
Yeah. One practical thing that I've done that's really helped me in my own ability to communicate and of course to self-reflect even before that is I got rid of an iPhone and I got rid of things like Spotify and uh just the wash of content that I was consuming that I think a lot of us consume without realizing it. I needed there to be more spaciousness in my brain at all times because I don't think we can pay attention when we're cluttered and squeezed and restricted. There has to be a sense of inner spaciousness.
A sense of inner spaciousness, and how without that we cannot hear our own voices.
I don't think so. Yeah.
How beautiful. I wonder, Christina, would you be able to tell us how do we find more about Parable?
Yes. Well, you can go to findyourparable.com and you'll see a little bit more about the services we offer and our wonderful team there. And like you, the only social media I'm really on is LinkedIn. So that's another place where folks can see some of my writing and connect.
Well, I'm really grateful that we could have this conversation today, Christina. I'm grateful that you have the expertise to support mission-driven organizations to live in their truest identity. I'm also so grateful to hear that you're seeing more and more organizations double down on what they believe in
Yeah.
and knowing who they are. That gives me so much hope. And I'm just really grateful that we could have this conversation today.
I'm so grateful to you. I always enjoy working with you as a client and now as a colleague and friend. And it's been wonderful to be on and get to talk today.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you for sharing your words.